When you interview someone like Stephen Bartlett, everyone's like,
oh, how did you start diving CEO?
No one cares. I interviewed the number one person in the game who said to me, the podcast game, it's very new.
What do you think about the fact that podcasts are so everyday now?
Do I think it's a bad thing that there's 3 million books in the world? No. So why do I think it's a bad thing that there's so many podcasts? The purpose of the podcast is to make people feel less alone. When I released the first episode, I realized that I had something, and I've got a notification being that you're number 10 in the charts. And that's where the imposter syndrome I realized came in. Why would I come onto your podcast? What are you doing to get to that goal, and what is your goal? If you had Stephen Bartlett in right now, would you actually get a quote from his book and contradict him on it? TikTok hated me, but I grew like that.
This episode is sponsored by Vorbos. Check them out in the description below. Guys, welcome to The Ground Floor, the podcast where we ask successful people exactly how they did it. Our guest today is Shivani Pau, the host of A Millennial Mind, which is a podcast, and she is also the founder of MyPerformance Planner, which for the first time ever we've displayed a product on the desk. We're official now. We're big time. Shivani, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm not my best self today.
It's okay. I should clarify, you're a little bit ill and you've still come in, which
No,
I
my
think
pressure.
is a big sign of character, I would say.
Thanks.
So for anyone at home that might not know you, can you give a little sort of summary of who you are and about your backstory?
Gosh, I always ask everyone else this question, and then when people ask me, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird being interviewed as a podcast host.
It is. So I guess I started my podcast, A Millennial Mind, in lockdown, and through that, it's given me so many different opportunities where I've started coaching, I've built the planner, I've been doing goal setting workshops, I've been invited to corporates to do loads of different things. So I think that is what I do as a whole, but who I am as a person, I think my mission and my purpose of doing things is to allow people to create a path that suits them,
right,
and to empower people to make decisions that work for them and to not conform and live in a mold that people have set out for us.
Got you. So if people were to ask about the kind of niche of what your podcast is.
Oh God, you're asking all these hard questions now. I don't know what my niche is.
Right.
I guess it's for millennials.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's called A Millennial Mind, but also for Gen Z as well. And I think it's for anyone who is figuring out who they want to be, right, and like what they want to do. But the purpose of the podcast is to make people feel less alone. That is the whole source of it. So every episode I want to make sure I'm covering a topic that someone can relate to and they will feel less alone. So that's why it's around taboos and controversy and different topics, because when you're going through something hard, no one in the world will understand how you're feeling in your circle, but there will be somebody out there that does. Right? And so that's what I want to do, is close that gap of people feeling isolated.
And if you go sort of right back to the start then, I mean, how did you, what was your path to actually figuring out that that's what you wanted to do? Because I think you were working a full-time role job straight out of uni.
Yeah, so I've always been somebody who has been very opinionated. And I think that's why I studied law at university, because my parents were like, you're so opinionated, be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And essentially what happened, I was going through a really difficult breakup, and I was in this phase of like learning around, self-development tools and listening to motivational talks, and I was kind of getting into that. And then my mum has a cousin called Rashma Sojani, and she was like, she's on a book tour, why don't you just come and meet her? And I was like, I don't really want to come and meet your bloody cousin, like I'm not interested. And my mum was like, just come. And I was like, fine. So I go to this lunch, and she is just like really intelligent, really smart, really dominant. Everyone was so impressed by her. She held her own, and I'd never really seen a woman like that. So I was intrigued, and I was, attracted to that.
Yeah.
And that evening she said, I'm hosting my own book launch, so why don't you come? So I went, and again, there was like 30 women that were just like that. And I think growing up, I didn't see women who were strong. I didn't see women who had their own money. I didn't see women who had their own mindset. I didn't see women who had their own opinions. And so for me, I was instantly drawn to this woman who had that. And I was put in an environment where I could see that there are other people like that in the world. And so weirdly or coincidentally or, destiny, whatever you want to call it, that summer, a month later, I was actually going to New York, and she lived there. And I said, can I shadow you for a day? And at this time I was listening to Tom Bilyeu, Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, and they all had these massive production houses. And she was like, I'm going to do a podcast. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, we're going to go into this like huge production house. And she took me into a tiny meeting room, like half the size of this one, no windows, and just a mic, nothing around you. And I was like, wait, what? What are you doing? And she was like, this is a podcast. I was like, well, I could do that. So I remember I came back and I thought of different ideas. And then in 2020, at the start, before the pandemic hit, I actually recorded 2 episodes in person with 2 different people. One was Mira Manic, who was a published author, had her own cafe, like blue ticked at that time, had like 50,000 followers on Instagram. So it was like huge that I got her. I was like so excited.
Yeah.
The second was someone called Candice, who was a model who had like 100,000 followers. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like people actually, it wasn't difficult to get big guests on and people found it so nuts. But I was like, I just messaged them. Like nothing, it wasn't that crazy. Like it wasn't like I had to message them 5 times. I just messaged them once and they said, yeah. And so I recorded with those 2 episodes. I actually took a camera to their house and I recorded in like one camera thinking it's going to be a great video podcast. It was a shambles. I mean, the audio had like £150 mic in between us.
Right. That is real budget.
Proper.
One camera. That's proper budget.
But I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
Like we're saying that's budget. I thought that's what people did.
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
No, but as in I did not know. As in I'm not into tech. I'm not into film. I'm not into anything. Like I had zero idea. I thought that if there was a camera facing me, it would
look like
in.
It does on Diary CEO or something. Yeah.
I just didn't know. I was so naive. I was so young. I just had no idea.
How old were you at the time?
Like 26.
Right, okay.
But like I don't have a background in this. Like I can't explain it. As in I'm not somebody who even had like a proper. It was my friend's camera. It wasn't even my camera. Right. You know, I didn't know what a tripod was.
Right.
I balanced a camera on top of like 20 books in her house.
Wow. Yeah.
So like I just didn't. I was just so clueless and I didn't know. And so when I watched the footage, I was like, okay, obviously can't release this as a video. This looks terrible. And so I just released the audio. And the audio, that £50 mic, I still have it. It worked for me for 3 seasons.
Really?
Really.
You did 3 seasons on a £50 mic between 2 people?
It then became me because we did it on one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it was a great mic. Blue Snowball Ice. It was fantastic. I think it was actually £40. I think now it's £50. At the time, it was much cheaper. But it really worked. And my first episode with Mira on that mic was number 10 in the charts in the UK. And
how did you get it to number 10?
I still have no idea. Zero,
Okay.
nothing.
Wow.
I'm releasing a podcast.
Yeah.
And I remember I delayed it because all that stuff was going on with Black Lives Matter. And I was like, it's not the time to release. So I think it was 2 weeks after that. I said, I'm releasing my podcast. 2 days later, I released that episode and I've got a notification being that you're number 10 in the charts.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, what? Like, how?
Yeah,
And I remember at that point thinking this is obviously a joke and a prank and everyone gets it. And that's where the imposter syndrome I realized came in. Okay. Because automatically I thought, well, everyone must get it. Because why would mine be any special? Like you said, at a £50 mic. Yeah. What's so great about it? And I think at that point is when I recognized that, okay, well, I have something. So in the first season, I only had 1 more episode, by the way. I sat on those episodes for 6 months. And it was only in lockdown I thought, okay, fine, I'll release it. Because everyone was telling me, you need to release it.
Yeah. Wow.
I made my cover art photo, which is still my cover art photo on Canva the night before. Okay. And it was a template called Singles Party. And I just changed it to A Millennial Mind instead of Singles Party.
Wow. So just a Canva template?
And a basic one, not even Canva Pro. It's still my artwork now. And I tried to change it and get like a professional person in and everyone hated it on my Instagram. Everyone was like, this is awful. It doesn't represent you. I was like, okay, I'll just keep the free Canva one, you know? But on that, when I released the first episode, I realized that I had something. I didn't know what it was, but I realized there was something that was good about the podcast because people were really enjoying it. And so I only had 1 more episode left. And I needed to release every week. So within a week, I was reaching out to a guest, researching, recording the podcast, editing the podcast and releasing it every single week for 10 weeks. And I remember, I'm no expert on how to edit and do all of this stuff. So I was figuring out how to do all of that stuff too. And so at 10 weeks, I was just so exhausted. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to do season 2.
And this was alongside a full-time job at the time, is that right?
Correct. Okay. Yeah.
So you're still working as a lawyer?
I was a management consultant. Right, I actually never practiced law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hated it so much. I couldn't do it. So then I was working at Atos, which was an IT company, actually down the road, funnily enough. Yeah. So when I was walking here, I was like, gosh, this is funny. Like, it's just like 5 doors down. So I was doing that. And after 10 weeks, I thought, okay, I need to take a break now. Unfortunately, I think when you want to take a break, you'll always find a reason to not start again. Like, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I haven't got this person. Okay, I've got time. And so it took like 6 months through the second season, which was the season I wanted to actually name the podcast, which was The Indian Expectation.
Right.
And it was all around the expectation around Indians. And again, in that season, I managed to get amazing guests. Okay. And people were asking, but this one was now on video. So it was on Zoom. So I was on one side and someone else was on the other side. and I had people from like Netflix shows, and I had people who were like celebrities, and I felt that, okay, this is like crazy that people are saying yes, so there must be something that's going well, because I don't have a big audience. I had like 2,000 followers.
Why do you think they were saying yes?
I still to this day don't know. I think truly, actually, no, I do. I think it's because people could see how passionate I was about it. And that's what they always say to me. It's like, we could tell that you were going to be good at it. But apart from that, I don't know. Like, I still don't know. But I think that with Mira, who was the first person, now I'm really good friends with her, she always said to me that you came with a really clear idea of what you wanted to do, and you were so passionate about it, and you're so well spoken that I thought you were going to be a good podcaster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I think people just like believed in it, that it was going to be something good. I also think when it's on Zoom, it's not much of a commitment.
True.
Like, to ask someone to come in person is a huge commitment.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
But on Zoom, you're just like, jump on. Like, it's so much easier.
Did you notice a drop in listener base when you were on Zoom? I know, kind of pandemic aside, obviously, because that was the only way you could do it at the time. But the quality is not as good.
No, because I had the mic.
But I just mean in terms of the video quality, and I mean, like, camera angles and that sort of thing. It's harder to actually get.
It was just one. But, you know, we're very advanced now. You know, back then everyone was doing everything on Zoom.
Yeah.
You know, Jay Shetty was on Zoom. Tom Bilyeu was on Zoom. So camera angles weren't a thing. This is what I'm saying. Like, it seems stupid now, but like, camera angles were just not a big deal when you're in the pandemic, because you just wanted to consume something. And this was like the back end of it now. So like when we were in that red zone, you know, those tears and all of that rubbish. Honestly, it feels like nuts.
I think it was also 3 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, that
Like,
really trips me out.
I was reflecting on the fact that so many of us used to wash our groceries. Did you do this?
I never did that.
Okay, so I have a video
You got 6 months left.
Yeah, clearly. I know. I'm
of like my auntie and uncle wiping down the milk bottle. Like, all the groceries would have to be taken outside. You wipe them all down, and then you put them in the house. And it's almost shocking how we just conformed. Like, all of us were like, we have to do this. We're gonna die.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, I can't remember what I was saying.
Just with the podcast, then. I mean, obviously, to get the guests on that you had on.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice to anyone who's listening about how to get those types of guests on? What worked for you? What didn't work for you?
I think a lot of people, and I think this is a mistake people make with when they ask me as well to come on their podcast, they'll be like, we really want you to come on, and they don't give me any benefit as to why it's going to benefit me. Like, why would I come onto your podcast? I think at the end of the day, what we've got to remember is that time is so important to everyone. And so if you're going to ask to go on someone else's podcast, always think what their goal is, what they want to do. So a lot of the time, if someone's released a new book, I'll say, I'm really excited for the release of your new book. I saw the synopsis of it, and I really think it could help my audience with X, X, and X, and therefore I'd be willing to put it into my right? Because at the end of the day, there has to be a win for them, and I think that's what people miss as well, is that it's all about like me.
Yeah.
And often I think when people also asked to be on the podcast, it's never about the value that they can bring to the audience. It's always, I've done this and I've done that, and I'm like, that's great.
I feel like those are just whenever someone proactively says I want to be on your podcast, in my mind it's always a bit of a red flag.
That is very true. When
I don't know.
Yeah.
Really?
I've accepted quite a few.
Have
from
you?
that.
Okay,
yeah, and it's worked well.
Yeah.
But I've been really clear in terms of who I accept on that and who
Yeah,
I
of
don't.
course.
Because some people just want to come on and they say, I really want to be on your podcast. Someone said to me the other day, this person really wants to be on your podcast. And I was like, that's great. What are they doing about it? And they were like, well, they don't have a platform. I was like, was I born with one? I was so angry. I was so annoyed at this point, because I feel like it's such an easy thing to say, oh, I want to come to your platform and I want to raise awareness. Why aren't you raising awareness yourself? If you're really passionate about something, you'd be raising awareness. You wouldn't wait to jump onto someone else's platform to raise awareness about it, because you don't care about that. You just want to help that one person. And a lot of the time people want to do a podcast, or they want to start a YouTube channel, and their values and their purpose isn't there. And I think that's what we're seeing so much now, is ever since short form content became a thing, we saw a massive rise in podcasts, because people thought, I'll just chop it up using Opus or something really easy and it'll go viral, and I'll go viral.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It just will never work. And I think a lot of the time you've got to figure out, like, what are you doing to get to that goal, and what is your goal? And that's why I think, going back to that topic of like when people are like asked to come on, or you're asking to go on someone else's, you've got to make sure you're aligned.
Yeah.
I had a guest that came on the other day. You should watch the podcast. It's called the one with Tam Core.
Okay.
And she, at the end of it, was like, I was like, what? She talks a lot about manifesting. And I said, what's the craziest thing you've manifested? And she was like, in lockdown, I used to, I was really working on myself, and, I started listening to this podcast, and I just felt like it was really aligned to what I wanted to do. And, for me, I really wanted to go on it, but I knew that I had to figure out like what my message was first. I knew I needed to align my actions, and I knew that I needed to be talking around a topic to even get onto that podcast. And she said, for so long, I just thought one day that person is going to message me, and that person is you. And it was my podcast, and I had messaged her.
Wow.
And she was like, even though I'm still the same person, and now, by the way, she's got like 700,000 subscribers on YouTube, and like double my amount of followers on Instagram, and I think triple my amount of followers on TikTok. But at the beginning, she didn't have anything. She had like 2,000, and she was like, if I came to you then I felt like I didn't have enough to share, and I didn't, even though my mindset is the same, I had to prove it and then come on a podcast. And I'm like, this is exactly what I mean. It's like, align your actions, then work on them, and then attract the opportunities. We think manifesting is like, I want to go on this person's podcast, they're just going to come to me. But I would never have gone to her if she wasn't an expert in her field. And it's only because she's become an expert that I've gone to her. And she knew that. So she was like, why would you have had me on? Even though I have the knowledge in my mind, what am I doing to prove that I can help someone else?
Yeah, the thing you said about the me thing really stands out, because I was asking an expert when I was learning how to do cold email marketing, and I was trying to understand the best ways to get outbound outreach and get it to convert higher. And I remember I sent him like a script that I had, and I said, I thought this was a really great script, and I was like,
what was it?
Check. It was just a script. It wasn't even about what I was marketing. It was more that I was learning how to do outbound, and it was more the way I'd structured the email. I thought was really good, and I was like, we've got this, we've got this, we do this, we do that, and he immediately came back and said, and he basically he'd sent a screenshot of my email back. And he'd circled every single time I said like I or me.
Wow.
And he said, and you haven't said like you.
You.
And he said, like, every single thing you've just done is talk about yourself. You haven't said anything about me.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like a customer, but he was replying as if he was.
Of course.
And as an expert in it. And I remember I was like, oh my God, that's so obvious.
Yeah, it
and
is.
I would but why do you think the natural inclination for people like us that try to do outbound and spread a message in one way or another, why do you think psychologically our gut reaction is to be like, this is what we do, rather than this is how we can help you, which seems obvious. But I think
it's so obvious to me, the answer. What do you think it is?
Why we go there first?
Yeah.
Well, because we're inherently probably selfish.
I think it's because we're trying to justify.
Interesting. Okay.
We're trying to tell people, right? This is what I'm so good at. Yeah. This is why I need you. I need validation. Tell me why I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Hire me. Well, no. How can I help you? And that service element is what's missing. That value element is what's missing.
Yeah.
Because then you actually have to do it.
Right? Yeah, because it puts pressure on you to actually deliver on what you're saying.
But we love to be validated. And especially with being online, it's like, I can achieve this. I can do this for you. It's very much around, what can I do? Right? And that's why you should choose me. And I think it's all around validation.
What do you think about the fact that podcasts are so everyday now? Like, I always hear the whole, like, everyone's got a podcast these days. Everyone's doing a podcast. Everyone's doing a podcast about this or that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Do you think it's a good thing that there are so many podcasts? Do you think it's a bad thing? I'm curious about your perspective on that.
Do I think it's a bad thing that there's 3 million books in the world? No. So why do I think it's a bad thing that there's so many podcasts?
Why do you think podcasts get more hate? Like, if you say to someone you're a
ridiculous.
writer,
yeah,
they don't go, oh,
there's so many books in the world.
So many books. Mate, have you been to Waterstones? But when you say like you're a podcaster,
yeah, it's true.
People just go, oh, of course, like podcast.
Well, I think because it's a new thing, and I do think it's because most people are doing it for clout and to go viral. And that's where the disconnect is. When you're writing a book, you're so invested into it. You know, it's taken you a long time.
Yeah.
You've had to go through loads of drafts. It's not easy. You've had to really conceptualize an idea. On a podcast, you don't necessarily have to conceptualize an idea. It doesn't have to flow. You can just literally come on and talk around sex and condoms like Alex Cooper and make 60 million in 3 years. You know, it's wild.
Yeah, it's
so I think
60 million in 3 years.
It's crazy.
Is that really Alex?
Yeah, it was like, was it Call Me
million.
Daddy, I think?
Call Me Daddy, yeah.
It's just
60
like...
million in 3 years.
Yeah, and she just talks around sex, blowjobs. It's amazing. It's fantastic for her.
She's done all right.
Unfortunately, I don't think I could do that, but it's so great. And I think that's the thing is that with podcasts, you don't necessarily have to have intellect to do one. With a book, I think you do. With a podcast, you can just talk.
The low barrier to entry.
That's why. But I always give people that answer. I'm like, there's millions of books in the world. Why can't there be millions of podcasts?
I've never considered it like that before.
Yeah.
I've now got that for my arsenal. I'm keeping that.
Yeah.
No problem.
So going back then, obviously, to when you were in season 2, I think it was, you were talking
Yes.
about. You were still working full time at this point.
Yeah.
What was the sort of the turning point for you to think, right, okay, I'm going to go full time on, what was the podcast? I'm assuming at the time you didn't have anything else like that.
I did. I had the planner.
You had the planner.
So I've always, I think I've always been somebody who, very weirdly, I don't think consciously, has always wanted to do multiple things. So when I was in my corporate job before I did the podcast, I did modeling. Then I went into like doing the podcast. Then I went into coaching, and then I went into the performance planner. So I always had something alongside the job, and I enjoyed being busy. I've always been somebody like that has enjoyed doing multiple things, if that makes sense. And again, I was on season 2 and season 3, and even for season 3, I remember I was getting like MasterChef people on and getting people with like blue ticks on. And you know, at that time, by the way, I know everyone has a blue tick now because you can pay $11.99 for it. But at that time, I was like, I have 2,000 followers and people with blue tick, and like 40,000 followers are coming on my podcast. Like, this is a really big deal. But I wasn't seeing no growth. Like maybe 60 likes on Instagram, maybe 100 views on YouTube, and it was demoralizing. You know, it was really stressful, and I was really trying to figure out what it was that I was doing wrong. My savior, as always in my story, is Rashma, who came from the US to the UK for a debate at Oxford Union. And she was like, do you want to come with me? And of course I was like, yes, absolutely. So I went to the Oxford Union. So posh, honestly. I was shocked. I went there, and as we were sat down for this debate, we had dinner. And this all makes sense in a minute. We had dinner, but we had no snacks, we had no drinks. We were sitting on these benches. I don't know if you've seen the Oxford Union. It's really... So if you go on YouTube and you go on the Oxford Union, it's like one of the most prestigious debates, right? Yeah. And the thing is, it's like 3 hours. It's not comfortable. It's like sitting in a church, like one of those church benches. But for 3 hours, I was so engaged. I was so focused. And I really learned a lot. And it's so weird, but I was like, hold on, I didn't have a snack, I didn't have a drink, I didn't go to the toilet and hide, and I didn't want to get up. I actually was very engaged. Now, when I'm watching TV, I can't do that. When I'm watching a movie, I can't do that. So what was it about this?
It was the fact that it was discomfort.
It was a debate. So like one person was telling their opinion, and another person was telling them another thing, and I was like...
I thought you were going to say because of the conditions.
No.
Because if it was uncomfortable, there was no like easy snacking, there was no comfortable chair to lounge back in, you were forced to be more engaged.
No, I would have fallen asleep normally during like, so I sometimes have to sit in uncomfortable situations and meetings, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to go to sleep. Right. But it was more that the conversation was so engaging. Okay. And I thought, how can I apply this to my podcast? Because I then was watching my podcast thinking, this is so boring. Like, I'm so bored of hearing, like, oh, tell me your journey. Okay, yeah, where did you get to? Who cares? Who actually cares?
I agree.
And so I was like, okay, how can I apply this? And I thought, okay, it has to be more debatey. And when you're in a debate, they jab you. Like, if you're in a debate, if you listen to one of the debates, they are going in. And I was like, I'm actually quite an aggressive person in general. And so if I'm going to ask a question, it's not that I mean to be, it's just I'll be like, what do you mean by that? And that is how I speak. But in the podcast, I would be like, oh, so can you explain that to me in a bit more detail? Instead of being like, that doesn't make any sense.
I'm the exact same. And I noticed myself doing it.
That was my biggest mistake.
Right.
It was my biggest mistake, because at that point I thought it needs to be more engaging because it's too flipping boring. But why don't I actually just start being a bit more like myself, being a bit more expressive, being a little bit more inquisitive, and let me just see. Right? And at this point, I also thought, it's so flipping boring watching it on Zoom. I'm gonna invest in a studio. So I actually started out at London Podcast Studios.
The ops.
Disaster.
Really?
Yeah, complete disaster, because they didn't connect the mics to the camera. And so I was using the camera audio.
No.
But this is how stupid I was. Even last year. This was last year, wasn't it? I think, yeah. I think beginning of last year, I didn't recognize the difference.
Wow.
I couldn't tell the difference between a camera audio and a mic audio, so I never said anything. It was only now when I listen to my YouTubes, I'm like, what was I thinking? I'm paying for a studio and I'm using the flipping camera mic. Like, what's wrong with me?
If only there was a better studio in London that you could come to record your podcast that included edits and social media clips. The link is in the description and in the bottom of the video. Check it out now. Continue.
What a nice plug.
Thank you. Not my first time.
So yeah, I mean, so I basically was like, I'm going to invest in a studio. I'm going to do that. I had no idea who Stephen Bartlett was in January.
This year?
Last year.
Okay.
I had no idea who he was.
Right.
And in January, there was an article that was written, and it says Stephen Bartlett makes 1.8 million from his podcast a year. And 2 of my friends sent me that. And so I clicked on it, and I was like, who is this guy?
I sent the exact same article to him.
Did you? Yeah. And I was like, who is this guy? And I was like, okay. And I started listening to his podcast and became addicted to it. I loved it. One Friday afternoon, I'm sitting at work. I was having an okay day. I get an Instagram DM from Reshma, my auntie. Again, I've told you she's a saver in my story. Should I go on his podcast? And I was like, yes, you should go on his podcast. And she was like, it's in LA. And I was like, wait, what date? I'm going to LA. And then she said, it's going to be on these dates. And I hadn't been to LA since I was a kid. And me and my boyfriend had planned to go there. We'd booked our flights to go on holiday on those exact same dates.
Whoa.
And I was like, this is
crazy.
This is nuts.
Yeah.
And then the day before, and this was the weird thing. I really believed that I was going to interview him, but I also didn't want to set myself up where I was so hyped for it, where I prepared so much that if it didn't happen, I was really disappointed. But now I'm like, that was so stupid because I should have prepared a bit more, because I was just going with her to the podcast. It was never I was going to do a podcast with him. And I took my little camera, and when the podcast finished, I said to him, hey, do you mind if we record a podcast? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so imagine if it's a setup like this. And I was like, oh, how should we imagine it's like me and you? So I was like, how should we like move the chairs? And he just like looked at his producer, and I actually said this to my boyfriend. I was like, I bet you he's gonna let me use a setup. And he said, should we just do it here? Because why would we rearrange all of the furniture and all of that nonsense? And in that moment, I was like, this is meant to be. This is so meant to be.
Wow.
And I didn't ask him the questions of like the basic questions of, tell me about your journey, tell me this. I was like, why did you write this in your book? You've written this in your book, but this is what you do in real life. What's the disparity? And that was the key, I think, that people really loved in that interview, was when you interview someone like Stephen Bartlett, everyone's like, oh, how did you start Diary of a CEO? No one cares. You know, everyone now cares because he's like he's grown it so tremendously. But at that time, he was good. He was number one. But nothing he had done was like crazy revolutionary. Even now, Stephen will tell you the same thing. I have an AI trackpad underneath my thing. I have 6 editors that do my work. I have Grace that tells me, we test everything on Facebook. We run 8 ads. Once you've listened to it in a podcast once and you're a huge fan of his, you want to know what the underlayer is, right? And that podcast changed so much for me, because I interviewed the number one person in the game who said to me that I have the potential to be number one. And that gave me the self-belief that I really, really needed. Because I don't know if you've seen the podcast. In the podcast, he's like, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll be number one. He said you'll be number one in 5 years. And he was like, you will be 100%.
That's enough of a motivation.
That would send shockwaves up my spine.
Yeah, it was. And so for me, I felt really boosted and really, I guess, what I'm doing and you know, the podcast game, you know, it's very new. A lot of people don't know where the potential is, right? Yes, okay, the potential's in sponsors. Yeah, okay, the potential's in like making a bit of money on social media, but nobody knows the actual scalability of it. And I think there's huge scalability.
I completely agree.
And there's not very many podcasts in the UK, I don't think, that are doing really crazy things.
Yes.
And for me, in that moment, I was, you know, I still am a small podcaster, I would say. And I, in that moment, was thinking, okay, well, I really need to make this number one. And I didn't have that self-belief. I didn't have that confidence. And he just gave that to me. And he didn't have to give it to me. And so for me, I just thought, okay. And I came back to the UK and did a whole LinkedIn post about how brave it was that I asked. And again, I think there's these small things in life, and everybody has them, by the way, of things that you do that other people are like shocked by. Me asking Stephen was not a big deal. I still to this day can't understand why everyone is so shocked by it.
I can't see that, to be honest with you.
But Stephen did a whole post about it. He then, when I came back from LA, he then just spoke about it on the Davina McCall podcast and was like, nobody does this. And in my head,
but that to me seems, I mean, I'm not like, oh, I would have that, but I genuinely feel like if I'm in a room with the biggest podcaster and I want a podcast, I would be
you're going to ask them.
Fuck it, just suck it up. Stephen, look, the worst you can do is say no. Stephen.
Exactly.
So I get that.
But it was that people found it so crazy, and people still find it so crazy that I did it. And I'm like, I don't understand it. And I think this is what I wanted to kind of go on to, is that there's things that you can naturally do. Like, I'm genuinely not that afraid. Like, I was swimming with Harry Styles one day randomly, and then I waited outside his changing room to ask him for his number. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
That's so baller. Can you please say that again?
But but as in, I just don't think it's that crazy.
Wait, hang on, that's so wild. You can't just drop that and then be like, but anyway, like, no. So wait, you were swimming with Harry Styles.
I was at Soho Farmhouse and me and my boyfriend were staying there.
Right.
And it was like 5 o'clock and it was very dark and it was in the winter. He was like, let's just go for a swim. And I was like, no, it's bloody freezing. I don't want to go for a swim, but it's a heated pool. So we were like, okay, fine, let's go before dinner. As I'm swimming, I'm like looking up opposite me and I'm like, that's flipping Harry Styles. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Harry Styles. He's swimming directly to me. I'm like swimming, so I obviously hold back. And then I like check next to me and I'm like, it is Harry Styles. And then I'm like to my boyfriend, like, and he's like, what? I don't understand what you're saying.
And your boyfriend's like, no, it's not. No, it's not.
He was just like, I don't understand what you're saying. But also, Harry Styles is not like the music we listen to, apart from Watermelon Sugar High is the only song I know. So he didn't really know. He was a bit confused. He was like, oh, the One Direction guy, you know? Like, because he doesn't really, he's older.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, it is. And then I stayed in the pool for as long as he was in the pool. He went inside. I swam inside. And then he didn't get out of the pool. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, this is so embarrassing. And then as I was coming up, he was going down. And I stood outside and I was like, I should go and ask him. And then I said to the staff members, I was like, is he going to be here tomorrow? And they were like, we obviously can't tell you that. And I was like, oh, for God's sake. And my boyfriend was like, just do it. And I was like, oh God, it's so embarrassing. I waited outside of his changing room with a cup and a pen. And actually, I think it was a tissue and a pen. And then when he came out, I got a bit flustered. And I said, can you write it on my hand? And he was like, I'll just write it on a cup.
But what did you actually say?
I said, hey, Harry, I really love your music. I would love to have you on my podcast. Can I have your manager's email? He said, yeah, sure, I'd love that. But I didn't have my phone.
Yeah.
Because I was swimming and I was staying there. So I didn't take my phone for the one time. And I also didn't have my change of clothes because I was staying there. So I just put my gown on.
Yeah.
Nightmare. Always take your phone everywhere with you.
Yeah.
Also, I looked like a drowned rat. I had no makeup on. my hair was all wet. It was a disaster. And he gave me the email. We still haven't had a podcast, but the point is you should never be afraid to ask anyone.
Completely
I couldn't agree more.
Ever.
It's the same thing with us when getting our guests on.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing.
So I think it's really important to not have that wall up and to put yourself down in that situation.
So in terms of like growth, because you were saying you were at the point where you were getting like 60 likes on a post and 100 views on YouTube. What was the main catalyst to getting to that next step? Because I think that's where so many podcasters stumble. Do you know the stat about the percentage of podcasts?
No, tell me.
Oh, it'll make you feel quite good.
Insane. So out of all the podcasts that are started, I think if you get, I think it's like, what percentage doesn't get past episode
90%.
3? 90% doesn't get past episode 3.
What?
Of people who start podcasts, yeah. 90% doesn't get past episode 3. And to get past episode, is it 100 or 50? No, it was 20. Episode 20, it's like 99%.
Of that 10%.
Stop it.
Yeah. So if you do a podcast and you do 20 episodes, you are officially in the top 1% of podcasts.
I don't know about that.
That is a fact.
Really? I need to see that.
I'm like nervously looking at Barney like, we've got the stats, right?
I know a lot of what? Really?
But no, genuinely, yeah. In terms of they looked at all aggregate podcast data, and then they looked at the amount of that have started that then stopped within X amount of episodes, and then within X amount of episodes, and it was like 90 by episode 3. They just quit. And because I think that, but it does track. Because if you think about it, about the amount of times someone out there is with a friend and they're like having a laugh, and they're like, mate, imagine this, but on camera. That's what they think it is, dude. They go, imagine this, but on camera, and they go, dude, it would actually be sick, wouldn't it? Guys, it would be sick. And then they do it, and they go, oh, I found a studio, and then they book it.
Yeah.
And then they do one, and they're like, okay, well, it's going to take a bit of time to get into it.
Yeah, of course.
Then they do a second one, and they're like,
this editing is a nightmare. Yeah.
Harry, have you got the clips? Oh, sorry, mate. I was literally, my work was starting. It's like, okay, well, Harry, do the clips. And then they do one more, and then they kind of, should we book another one? Oh, fuck it, mate. It's a bit long, innit? Like, that clip got 3 views on Instagram. Like, fuck it, bin it off. And then that's it. And I think that is 90%. It really does make sense. And then to get to 20, you do 10 episodes, and then you're like, oh, this is long.
Yeah.
The editing, the guests, it's like, it's a lot of work.
No, it is.
And I think people just think you hire a room, pop an email out. Do you want to come on my podcast? Yeah, sure. What time? 2 p.m. Sweet, love. See you then. Done. That's not how it goes.
No, it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think only if you see one and you see the production value of it behind it, you know how hard it is.
100%. So yeah, for that growth that you were talking about, from that level of 100 views, 60 likes, whatever it is, how did you get that next step in exposure and in audience? Because I think
I got the studio. Okay. So the studio really helped me because I was able to leverage better guests. So again, in the studio, I had 2,000 followers. Okay, but for some reason, I also felt that when I was meeting people, I was able to secure a podcast with them, which was really great because at the time, my first person in the studio was this girl called Amira who was doing this app called Join My Wave. I think she had over 100,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
And she said yes. The second was somebody called Kishan Badalia, who was a doctor and a DJ. And he'd been on tour in Ibiza with like, I can't, Fat Man Scoop, is that the DJ? Can't remember.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, a DJ, so that was really cool. And then the third one was Roxy Nafusi. And again, I have Roxy's YouTube, who's the Sunday Times bestseller for 25 weeks in a row, a joke, like never heard of, amazing, doing so well. But she said yes to me again when I had 2,000. And I remember after Roxy's episode is when I went to LA. And then I did Stephen's. And the podcast grew from like, as in at that point I was on 6,000 followers. And I started on 2, if we remember, with the whole modelling situation.
Yeah.
So it was very, very slow. But at this point is when I was being invited to like PR stuff and I started to go into events. And so things were picking up for me where people were like, Shivani has a podcast now. Because once it happened in the studio, people took me a bit more seriously. And then when I went to LA and I obviously shared the Stephen story, that did really well. But I still didn't grow that much on Instagram or on YouTube because it was just one episode, if we remember. When I came back, I got a brand new studio, and that was that Purple studio. And I got my first guest in that studio was Harpreet, who was the winner of The Apprentice.
Right.
So
Okay, yeah.
incredibly topical. And that is when I started asking really aggressive questions. And I cut up the trailers really aggressively. So I was like, did you do it for fame? Why did you bother going on if you have a successful business? And I was really aggressive in my questioning. And TikTok hated me. Like, people were like, you're a bitch. Like, shouldn't you be supporting?
Yeah, but that gets you growth, though.
That wasn't my intention, though. Because with Stephen, the reason I think that podcast did so well is because even though, first of all, it was ad hoc. So you can ask a question, but then to make a good interview out of it is a different situation. But it was because I had in the back of my head, don't ask him those basic questions, right? Because I had that, I didn't also want to ask Harpreet, tell me about your business. No one cares about your business. Everyone cared about, why did you even go on The Apprentice? What value are you going to get out of it? How much do you invest into it? What's the impact of it on you? And so Stephen's was the first one where I tried and tested that kind of aggressive questioning method. And then Harpreet, I went in too hard. And then I did, after her, Shannon Singh from Love Island. Again, very topical.
Yeah.
And I was asking her questions, again, in that tone. But I started to tone it down a little bit because I was like...
But with Harpreet, was it a thing where did he like say, dude, what are you doing? Why are you being like this?
Who said that? Oh, it was a girl.
No, I'm saying Harpreet.
Oh,
when
yeah,
you had
yeah.
him on.
She's a girl.
She's a girl from The Apprentice.
Yeah,
Okay, because I haven't seen The Apprentice.
Yeah, she's
so
the one.
when you had her on and you said you were
No,
super
she
aggressive,
loved it.
Okay, so she didn't actually have a problem with it.
Before I go through any podcast, I will always tell the guests, this is what we're going to talk about. Are you comfortable with it?
Okay.
And she said, actually, this is the best one I've done because everyone constantly asks me the same questions.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so many podcasts out there right now because no one had asked her, okay, well, actually, did you go on it for fame? And if you're already successful, why do you on The Apprentice? Everyone wants to know that.
I don't know why
Everyone who
someone
goes on
wouldn't
The
ask
Apprentice-
someone that. That seems like the obvious question to ask someone who went on The Apprentice. Did you go on it for fame?
Yeah, no one was asking that. You're not
Fair
going to
play to
ask
you.
somebody. The difference is, if you had Stephen Bartlett in right now, would you actually get a quote from his book and contradict him on it? Probably not.
No, probably
Yeah.
not.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
So I had a book quote from him that he said, you're not judged by your status, your car, your money, your wealth, your bank account. And I asked him, you just said this, but every single person on your podcast is one of those things. Why have you not interviewed a homeless person? If you believe that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so I started learning how to be comfortable with those questions because I've always been someone who's thought like that anyway. And so with Harpreet, it was like, everyone goes on The Apprentice and says they're so successful, right? I don't know if you watched The Apprentice, but they go on there and they're so arrogant, right? They're like, I don't need you, and it's like, well
Sorry,
then why
I'm
are
the
you...
best businessman in the world. Yeah.
So why are you on the show? And I think I just used to ask it in that way. But with Harpreet, I tested it and I felt it was too harsh. She was very comfortable with it. She loved the interview. We got along really well. But the feedback was like, it seemed like I was being a bit unsupportive. And then after that, I started testing it now. So now my method of saying, like, I had someone on yesterday who was talking about money. And I was like, that's all very well and good. But, like, I'm a single mother. I can't afford to save £500 a month. Like, what do you want me to do? And he was like, can you save £1? Can you save £2? And I was like, no, I can't. And he was like, it's a choice. And I was like, how can you tell me it's a choice? And he was like, I was on 6-figure sums and I was living in an apartment on a mattress and I was paying less than $400. It's a choice. And I was a bit like, okay, fair enough. Right? But a lot of people would just not question in that way. And I think you have to become comfortable with what's your style. So if you're really expressive and that's your style, stick to it. Don't stick to the boring podcast questions of like, yeah, tell me how you're doing. And you have to, I think you have to like be okay with the backlash as well from that. Like I do get backlash all the time, and there's sometimes things I've said that have gone super viral, like last year. Actually, we'll talk about that in a minute. But my point is that you have to be okay within yourself, and then I think the growth will come. And that's how that growth did come. So I think last year I was growing. So after that, the studio, I remember so specifically, I came back in March from Stephen and I had 6,000. And in June, when I was in Marrakesh, I reached 10K. And it was very, very slow. Yeah. I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is taking forever, right? Then I'm not sure. I think it was just the consistency with the podcast. I was being invited to a lot of stuff. I felt like my name was being a bit more out there. And so I was growing slowly. I then wanted to do an episode on are big weddings a waste of money? Because I'm Indian. Okay. And I think we all got our priorities wrong. And I think that why are we spending, for an Indian person, by the way, and for somebody in my community, and this is going to seem disconnected and it's going to seem out of touch and whatever, but it is a fact that a lot of people spend between 50,000 and 100,000 pounds on their wedding, right? And that's what is normal for a lot of people. It's not, I don't think that's a good use of money.
Right? I didn't. What's funny is I'm not married, and I know one person that's married, like in my
really.
Yeah. So to me, and I'm always hearing how expensive weddings are. So I think for some reason in my head, because the whole like culture says like the world's like, oh, weddings are an expensive thing. You say your wedding from any culture. Yeah. I assumed weddings probably did cost like 50, 60K. I probably assumed that. I actually thought Indian weddings would be way more expensive.
£100,000 for one side of the family is really expensive, I think.
It is.
Oh, so one side. No, it is really expensive. But I
also
think
£100,000 for like a whole wedding is expensive, I think, in my opinion. But if you want to have a lavish wedding, like I think the basic people would say is 50,000 from me, 50,000 from me. That's 100K. Yeah. £100,000.
No, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think what I was trying to say is because.
That's an average one. Yeah, it's not a lavish Indian wedding.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm hearing everyone always says from anywhere, like, oh, weddings are so expensive. Oh, you got to save for the wedding. And I'm like, well, how much people actually? I mean, are people fucking? But
the thing is, for an English wedding, you just have one day, right?
Yeah.
For an Indian wedding, you have like 4 days. So that's why it's so expensive. So that's why. So it depends, obviously, where you want to have it. But I reckon you could do a registry and a party after for like 30K, couldn't you? Yeah. I reckon.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah? If not less. Yeah.
Yeah, if not less, right? So for an Indian wedding, like 100K for both is like combined. Is what the average is, and that sounds stupid, but like people are spending that much money. Anyway, my point has been, since I was a child, I've never cared about a wedding. I actually think they're so stupid. I do want to get married, I would like to say, and I don't think the concept of marriage is stupid, but I was seeing so many people struggling in their relationship because they were living with their in-laws, or they were living in a really small flat or a house. But they spent so much money on their wedding, like £150,000 on their wedding.
Yeah, that is mental.
And I was like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Or
it's like people that are working at Tesco's and financing like a Range Rover, and you're like,
it doesn't make any sense. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to do this topic. Now, I knew that this podcast was going to do well. I just knew it. The actual episode didn't
clip
go...
that for this episode.
The actual episode didn't actually go viral or anything, right. But I knew it was a very contentious thing. I knew a lot of people felt this way because we had also just come out of COVID, and people were like, we've just come out of COVID. People were okay with having small weddings. Why are we going back to ginormous weddings? You know, this was a time for us to reflect and think we don't need to have 1,000 people at our wedding or 500 people at our wedding. It's okay if you have 100. It's not a big deal. I said this quote around, don't ask me when I'm getting married, because as a 28-year-old South Asian girl, everyone was constantly asking when I was getting married. And I was
so
just
when are you getting married?
Yeah, literally. I was just sick of it. And
that
so
must grate on you after a while.
I just said it. And it was not planned, and I have no idea what happened, but I uploaded it onto my Instagram on a Friday.
You just said what?
I said, don't ask me.
You said don't ask me, right.
Sorry, I thought you'd seen it. The clip was, I said, I find it very annoying, and I kind of find it illogical when people say to me, when you're getting married, how do I know? And then I kind of went into this whole spiel of like, it's not coming from a bad place, but the girl doesn't know. Like, why are you asking me? Ask the boy. I'm not going to propose. So why are you always asking me when I'm getting married? And I was very expressive in that. And that's what people said, because I was very much like, I don't know. But it was very natural. I didn't even think that it was going to be a hook. What I do remember is my editor clipping another bit, and I said, no, you have to clip the bit about asking when I'm not getting married, because I know people feel the same way. I did not know it was going to go so viral though, because I uploaded that on a Friday on my Instagram, and I remember some random account with like 400 followers on TikTok uploaded it onto theirs, and they got 1 million views in a day.
Really?
And they didn't even tag me.
Wow. Okay.
So I remember on the Sunday waking up, and I had 17,000 followers at this point, by the way. And I remember, or 15,000, and it went up to like 17,000 on Instagram, and I was like, oh, whoa, that's quite a lot. And I remember saying on my Instagram story on a Sunday morning, like, is it weird that this person has done this and they should have tagged me? And people were mixed. Some people were like, no, it's not that weird. Yeah, you should have da. That week, I went from like 17,000 to 58,000 followers on Instagram. And I'd uploaded the same clip on my TikTok, and it just wasn't going viral.
Yeah.
But what happened was I basically commented on every single one of the comments on that girl's video, and it led them to my Instagram.
I'm with you, okay.
And that clip went to like 2 million on Instagram within that week. I think it's on like 5 point something million now. It's ridiculous. Wow. But I grew like that. And I was so shocked. As in, I never knew Instagram growth could be like that.
No.
And I couldn't really believe that so many people were resonating with that one clip. It was so crazy. And then what happened after was just a snowball effect, because I had several other clips like that just hit 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. And I was just growing. And it was really hard for me, because in the first time I grew, when I said I grew from like 17 to 55, I was kind of like, okay, this is a fluke. It's not going to happen again. But then I grew to like 85 by October. Okay. And that was in August I grew, by the way. August. And then in October, I was on like 60. October, I was on 87.
Was that off the back of any one clip, or was that just organic growth?
It was all organic. No ads, nothing.
Yeah.
And then it was actually then I decided to quit my job, because I thought, if this clip is going viral and I was getting loads of deals coming in, I was seeing the potential with where I could go. I was like, if I can really focus on the podcast, then how many more videos can I make like this? Because at that time, I was recording in my lunch break. I was recording after work. I had 0 holidays left. I used every single holiday for the podcast. I had no more holidays left. So I had to make a decision, like, what am I going to do? And I was like, I can't give up at this point. I've just finally grown. So let me just take the risk. I took the risk, and I was just growing and growing and growing. And
were you making any money from the podcast?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And this is the thing I want to tell people as well. You should never ever quit unless you've got a proof of concept.
Yeah.
I had 7 different revenue streams. And that's not to show off, and I wasn't making loads of money. That's to show that I had proof of concept in every single one.
And were they all related to the podcast?
All related to the podcast. I had the podcast, I had the coaching, I had the planner, I had my corporate events. I had ads on Instagram, YouTube, and I had, what's it called? Like YouTube revenue paying me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had different things, and the coaching, the podcast, and the ads were 3 big ones. I was making more than my salary. So it wasn't like I was making loads, because you have to account for tax and all of that rubbish. But the thing is that I had a proof of concept, and I thought, okay, let me try. It's about having different revenue streams, because I think that's the most important thing people have to remember. Even if that is the fact that you have a YouTube revenue stream, which is just like the AdSense, it's still a revenue stream. So you can scale that, right? Even if that's a consulting fee or whatever it is, however small you think it is, just remember that it is one, because you can always scale something. And that's why I think that's what made me quit as well. It's like, I was like, I'm not making loads of money, and I'm not making a consistent amount, but I am making some in each pocket of these. And so how can I scale those, right? And that's what I really wanted to do. So this time last year, I was on 87K. And I remember before the end of the year, I don't know how I thought of this, but I thought, I remember I got invited to speak at McKinsey, and that would change so much for me. Again, my imposter syndrome was, this is obviously a prank and a joke.
How did you get that?
I still don't know.
But how did you actually get that?
They emailed me.
They emailed you?
They emailed me.
Off the back of watching one of your episodes.
Correct. And we're like, we love what you're talking about. Would love for you to come into my team.
Interesting.
And talk around goal setting.
Wow.
And I thought it was
That's a huge moment. Okay.
Yeah, and I thought it was a prank, because I thought, why would McKinsey, the best consulting firm in the world, one that I never even thought I'd dream of applying for, especially I was a consultant before, have emailed me? So anyway, the point was that happened a few times with different companies. And this time last year, I don't know what came over me. I must have just thought, I still don't know. But now I think back, I thought, I must have just thought, should I do this workshop myself? And so I set up my own goal setting workshop. I advertised it on Instagram 2 weeks before Christmas, and we had 75 people that turned up. And now I think, gosh, how did I do that? I don't know. But last year I just must have seemed to be, I think I was just so hungry and on this roll. I was also really, really pushing myself in ways that I hadn't before. And I was just so excited. I remember waking up at like 5 a.m. and being so excited. And this year's been very different for me, by the way. And I thought nothing could stop me.
How has this year been very different for you?
I'm going to come on to that.
Okay.
It will make sense in a minute. So I felt that it was really, I was just pushing myself. I did the workshop. I hit 100K before the end of the year. And again, I thought, okay, it was a bit of a fluke the first time, but I'm consistently pushing this growth. Again, January started and I took 2 weeks off in January because I was so tired.
Yeah.
And that was when I met Harry Styles, and I remember Spotify got in touch with me then, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so many things were happening for me. I got invited to do a TED Talk. So I was praying for a TED Talk. I was getting so many emails from publishers being like, we want you to write a book with us. It just felt everything was just on a roll. And then in February, I went to India for my cousin's wedding. And I had actually planned this when I had a full-time job. I wanted to do a podcast season in Mumbai. And I wanted to call it Mumbai's Millennial Mind, because the goal isn't just to hear the stories of people here. It's to do it abroad as well. And so I was in Mumbai and I had only 6 podcasts booked in. But while I was there, people were so collaborative, and I did 16 in 4 days.
Wow.
And we finished the wedding, and as you know, Indian weddings was a 5-day wedding, 4-day wedding. I was so tired. We landed in Mumbai at like 10 o'clock that evening. 7 a.m. the crew were in my room setting up. And I've never been more tired in my entire life. And again, I was getting really, really big guests in. And that was a real, I think, wake-up call for me, because I was so, so, so tired. And at the end of it, I just remember thinking like, oh my God, never again. And my brain was fried. And when I came back, I had 16 episodes and I had to can half of them because they were just absolute garbage. I was asking the same questions. Like, I'll tell me about your journey. I didn't research them. I didn't know them. How did I have time to do it? On the last day, I did 6 episodes in one day, 6 hours of recording back to back. And that really made me think.
And for context, by the way, people at home, doing 1 episode takes an hour of you.
Yeah.
You do 1 hour, an hour and a half, and you come away you're like, whew, that was, being on the spot, talking. Your brain is engaged. You're thinking of questions, thinking of what they're saying.
And you haven't met these people before.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about them. You're just trying your best to make sure you're getting the best out of them as well. And I remember when I came back, I was so burnt out, so burnt out. And I think I didn't realize that because the last year I was so hungry and passionate, that this year I just really thought I was lazy, and I thought that I no longer cared, and I thought that I got complacent. So I was then pushing myself to do more stuff, and that's why this year has been really different with me. Last year I was so not focused on my health. I didn't care. I was so skinny. I look at my photos now and I think, how was I so skinny? And I think I was just under an immense level of stress. I never went to the gym. I never made time for myself. I never saw anyone. I'd go to an event, meet podcast guests, do the podcast. I was obsessed. And I still am obsessed with it. I still love it more than anything in the world. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here when I'm ill. Like, no matter what, I will always go to a podcast. Like, yesterday I had the same situation. And someone was like, do you want to cancel? And I was like, never. Like, I will never cancel. I would literally, if I broke my leg, I would be doing it, because I love it. But the point is that this year I was forced to take a step back because I genuinely could not think of new ideas. And at that point, I realized that I can never do that to myself again. You can never get to a point where I'm doing like 6 episodes in a day. It was stupid.
Yeah, but do you think that there's an argument that at least at one stage you kind of have to go through that? Because like you hear a lot of people talking about that. Mr. Beast talked about that, where he said he would wake up and do a YouTube call with other he had about maybe 10K at the time, 20K, and he knew a couple of other YouTubers that were around the same level, and he said every single day we would go on Skype at 10 a.m. and sometimes we'd be on Skype for 3 hours, and sometimes we'd be on Skype until midnight for like 14 hours. And you hear it with martial artists, you hear it with musicians, you hear it. There's this phase where you go through where you just you don't, everything else does have to take a backseat.
100%.
And I think I'm in that phase right now. Barney and I are working on a separate project, and with everything that we've got with the studio and with the podcast and everything else, I haven't been going to the gym. I haven't been eating terribly, but I haven't been eating great. My sleep hasn't been great. But I'm always working, and I'm always like, sometimes I'll be up until 4 a.m. thinking of ideas and writing things down, and I know I should sleep, but if the ideas are coming, you're in flow state. You don't want to let it stop.
I agree.
So you just run through with it. And it's like, and I know that, is this advice I would say for longevity? Of course not. But right now, at the stage that I'm at, with all the different things I have going on, I think I'm okay to sacrifice a bit of my health and a bit of everything else, because that's a sacrifice to get to that next level where you have the luxury to be like, okay, I have more systems in place, maybe I have a bigger team, now I can focus on getting back in the gym and doing this. But right now, nothing else matters to me other than building my vision.
I love that, and I would encourage you to do that. I think that's not what I'm saying. I think the mistake I made with the podcast is I did too many and I failed at that, in my opinion. I don't think they were good enough episodes. It was the mistake that I made of like piling.
Yeah.
I literally finished my job, was growing my audience. By the way, it was only me at this point. There was nobody else helping me. Then I did the workshop completely by myself to run an event. I had never run an event in my entire life. To do tickets, to do a system. Yeah. I had no idea. Shopify website, I had no idea. I just designed a brand new performance planner. They were all coming in. I had no clue what I was doing. And then I did a TED talk, and then I did Mumbai's Millennial Mind, and I was speaking, like, I don't speak Hindi. I was like trying to speak to the crew members, trying to organize it, trying to do all of that. I felt that I was doing too much at one time of what I didn't know. And actually the end result wasn't what I wanted, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I think that there is I'm trying to say this in a nice way.
Say it in whatever way you want to say it.
I think a lot of people have become like, oh, we need to look after ourselves and just rest when we want. Yeah, you can.
If you want 5th place.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I went to an event recently and someone said, everyone's a winner. No, they're not.
Yes, thank you.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that it's
you don't
harsh.
deserve the same accolades if I work harder than you.
It's not about working hard. It's also just about, like, look, the reason why people say 9 to 5 and entrepreneurship is different is because one is where you're really obsessed and you're passionate about it, and one is when you're doing it for the sake of it. It's the energy you bring and put into something. And in order to not work like 10 to 10 or whatever your 12 to 12 is, you do have to put that hard work in at the beginning. And I think online, what we're seeing is this hustle culture, but people, I don't think, are working that hard. I think people love to pretend that they're working hard.
I completely agree.
True.
So I can't, did you say to me in the lift, oh, is it the event you've got to go to, is it hard work? And I think I said to you, like, no. And I see so many influencers saying, I work from 8 till 10 and I still work as hard on my corporate job. And I went for a breakfast meeting this morning, and then I went, I'm like, do I think going to an influencer event is hard? Absolutely not. Does it use my brain power? No. Do I have to network? Yes, of course. Yeah. Is that hard? No.
Yeah.
And it might be hard for some people, for sure. But is that you hustling, grinding, working really hard? In my opinion, no. Going to a movie premiere is not hard work for me.
Yeah.
And I think we've like merged this into one. It is a work activity 100%. Is it hard work? No. Do I sometimes have to go to events because I have to make connections and meet people? Yeah. Do I count that as me working for the day? No. But I personally don't count that. I wouldn't count that as like an 8 to 8 day.
Yeah.
I would count that as my leisure time where unfortunately I have to network with people.
That's savage.
Why is it savage?
No, I think it's savage because I don't think anyone would classify it like that. I think even I'm guilty of that.
It's a bit stupid.
No, but I think the argument is that, like, if you acknowledge that, let's say a networking event, right?
Yeah.
If you acknowledge that you ideally you don't want to be going to that networking event, but you know that it's something that's going to enhance your professional career.
Yes.
Then that is a work activity, and therefore, if it's something that if you would not be choosing to do it in your free time or personal time, it would qualify as work because it is work. This is work
for me, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But right now, I'm missing out on doing my own work.
Yeah.
So I still have to do my work when I get home.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I think that's what I'm trying to say is like people will say like this is work.
Yeah.
So I've done. Let's say this was, I don't know. Let's say we did 3 of these today, right? Yeah. Then you'd go home and be like, well, I've done my work. I've done my work because I've done 3 podcasts today. But no, you haven't.
Well, no, but
that's what I'm saying.
No, but in that situation, that's because you've got work left over.
No. This is the difference I'm trying to say. Going to one of these events is not work for me. It doesn't count as my work. It's something I have to do additionally. It is a work event, but it's not something I see as like I've worked hard today. Does that make sense?
It doesn't. Well, I think we're agreeing, but we're saying different things.
Yeah.
I think that I'm not saying it's not. I agree that it's not hard work.
Yeah.
But I think that when you've worked, let's say, an 8-hour day.
Yes.
On various different actual work things, and then you're tired and you're hungry, but you have to then go to Central for a 3-hour work thing.
Yeah.
And you're fucking exhausted, and you have to go. Oh hi. Oh, you've got this.
Yeah.
It
it's
is
tiring.
fucking work.
Of course
now,
it is.
Is it hard work? Is it as hard as
Yeah.
like, working as a nurse or like grinding 8 hours in an office when you've got back-to-back meetings, whatever? Of course it's not.
No.
But I think it's definitely not fun, or not always fun. Some events obviously are, but it's definitely not fun. A movie premiere is probably a bit different, but you know, going to some of these networking events and you got Hi, I'm Clive on your top, and it's a grind.
It is a grind, but life is a grind.
Exactly.
And I think we've just got to let go of this image that like everything is easy, it's just, if you want to be successful, it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. These quick rich, like these people are like, I make £5,000 a day on TikTok. No, you don't. And maybe you do, but you've like spent years and years perfecting what you're doing, or this drop shipping thing that everyone's doing now. And you know, I think there's so many quick get rich fast schemes, and I don't believe in that.
Sorry, just to go back, you were talking earlier about the excitement and the hunger that you had first year that you were doing this, when you actually went on full time. Like how did you find that? How did you find that hunger? How did you find that excitement? No, but not as in like, how did you actually
I don't know. I need to get it back.
How did you know that was like, that was the right thing to do, and that's what I need to spend my time doing, and this is what's going to work? Like, how did you find that?
I didn't. It was intuition. I just loved it. I remember I used to wake up at 2 a.m. and voice note myself. I genuinely have voice notes on my phone still to this day. Make sure you ask this question, make sure you do this, make sure you do that.
Dude, I do the same thing.
And I think that now I am really tired. I'm older. I'm like 30, you know. I feel that and this year it was so stupid because I used to be the person that would say, just sleep 4 hours to my boyfriend. I just, what's the big deal? Just sleep 4 hours, get on with it, and drink 4 coffees a day and you'll be fine. And this year I am so tired. I need 7-8 hours of sleep. I never used to be that person. I think we've got to adapt and evolve and change. And, you know, this year was really focused on building offline. This is not about my year of growth this year. This is really about the community that I want to build. This is really about nourishing the people that I have. This is really about maintaining that group of people who are really interested in the podcast and thinking about where I want to go. This last year was all around growth for me, and this year, I have grown, but I'm not grown at like, you know, I'm not in the millions, you know. And I think this year's all been about the underground work, the basis, the foundation. You know, there's so many things that I just did on a whim, as you know, like did my Canva thing the night before, never had a logo, never had brand colors. I moved to studio again and, you know, figuring all of that stuff out for me. And there's so many things that I want to achieve and so much underneath the iceberg that I need to focus on before you see the results at the tip of the iceberg. And that's what the focus is.
I think the impression I get from when I look at hyper successful people is that there's a phase of just relentless obsession where nothing else matters, where you need that to get you to like step number 10 out of 100. But then when you get to step 10, to get from step 10 to 100, that's when you need to have the balance, because you're playing in a different game at that point.
Exactly.
To beat everyone else from 1 to 10, you just have to want it more and be obsessed more. And then when you get to 10, it's like, okay, now I'm playing this is checkers, this is chess. This is like, okay, I need to make sure I'm getting my sleep or my food or my health or whatever, so that I can continue to compete against these people who, you know, are doing that.
It wasn't conscious, by the way. It was very unconscious. I just remember being like, you're saying, how did I do it? I don't know. I just loved it. I was just doing it all the time. I still love it.
It's instinctive.
Now I'm better at it as well. So I don't have to spend so long prepping. I don't have to spend so long thinking. I can master it very quickly. And this year's about focusing, okay, well, where else do I want to go? Where is my horizon? What is it I want to do? But I do think that when you're doing your own thing, you do have to be really relentless. You do have to be someone who just doesn't give up, because it's so easy to give up. There are many times I'm thinking, I just want to go back to my corporate job. This is so hard. It's so difficult. But I just don't want to add to that statistic. I don't want to add to that number of women are going to fail, you're going to fail, podcasts are going to fail. I need to change it.
This has been like a really intense episode. I've loved it. I feel like I really connect with the energy that you have and your outlook and your approach to stuff. I think I'm very big on synchronicity, and I think there's a lot of things that are happening in my life at the moment in my own personal development, and I feel like this episode happened. We were meant to have you on like 8 months ago, something like that.
I know, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. But I think my point is, I think it made sense that you're on now. I think some of the things that you said I really needed to hear, and I think with the path that I'm going on and the things that I think the next 6 months I think will be quite formulative.
Timing is everything.
And so I think it makes sense that you're on now, and I'm really glad that you could make it. Before we round up, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Performance Planner, just what it is and
Absolutely. So look, when I started the podcast, I felt like a lot of people were intrigued by the thought process that I had, and so they asked me for coaching. Let's use you as a guinea pig. What's your goal for December?
For December, as in month
Big
away?
picture goal, yeah.
Big picture goal for December, I guess, is we are filming. So I've got a YouTube channel, a personal YouTube channel.
Amazing.
And it started as like a complete random thing. But I was going through some stuff. And so I do a bunch of other stuff. I'm a comedian. But I've done music in the past, but I basically launched a YouTube channel just for myself. I didn't tell anyone about it. And in 2 weeks I got to a K, and I've now got a Discord community and everything else. And it's like
Amazing.
sharp out of nowhere. And I'm really like loving it. And so I basically said to Barney, he was looking for something a bit more creative to sink his teeth into. And so I said, dude, why don't you just like jump on board with this? Let's just scale it. We've already learned a whole lot about YouTube, about thumbnails, editing, titles, everything else. We've broken down the biggest YouTubers. We sat for like 10 hours like last week. And
I need those insights.
Oh,
Thank you.
I'll gladly. Like, we'll do coffee 100%. I'm obsessed
Amazing.
with YouTube.
Really?
I'm obsessed. We sat for 10 hours last week, and we literally spent 10 hours breaking down the biggest YouTubers' videos. We said, all right, make a note of how often they cut in their intro. Make a note of what color tones they're using. Make a note of whether they have music. When they do a punchline, do they have music under it, or do they have no music under it? How loud is the music relative to their voice?
Love that.
How many? Like, we are obsessed with it. And the goal is to get to 1 million subs by my 30th birthday, which is October the 7th in 2024.
Okay, amazing.
Yep.
That's cool. So
Yep.
what's your goal for December?
For December, the goal is we're launching the new format of the channel on January 1st. So the goal until the end of December is to film 12 videos so that we can have the first 3 months of weekly videos done.
So you want to have 12 videos, right?
12 videos by the end of December.
Okay,
yeah.
so what do you need to do to get those 12 videos done?
We need to finalize, some logistical stuff, I guess, for some of the videos that we need. We also need to find, I guess, dates to record. There are some people that we might need for those videos because I'm doing some stuff with some subscribers. What else do we need? I mean, like
Topics?
well,
Scripts?
we've scripts. Topics we've got scripts, shot lists, locations, I guess, logistics stuff. Yeah, shots, voiceovers. Yeah, shots, scripts, and logistics.
Okay. And then you're going to... So that's one of your goals, yeah?
Yeah.
So then we've broken down. There's going to be more stuff in here.
Okay.
Then you're going to tell me, okay, in week one, what are we focusing on? So first of all, the first thing you need to focus on is, I don't know, getting those people there.
Yeah.
Making sure you've got the scripts ready. All of that is going to be week one. Week two, you're going to maybe do the filming.
Yeah.
Week three, you're going to do your voiceovers. And week four, you're going to do your final edit.
Yeah.
So that's for one goal. So what you're doing is actually breaking down very granularly what you need to achieve.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, in this month, I'm going to do that. Well, when are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Now, the thing is in a week, you have things that you have to do. So, for example, today, I had a meeting at Selfridges in the morning.
Okay.
I then had to come here and I've got a meeting in the evening, right? So I have a gap now when I go home of time that I need to do. So with you, whether you've got a podcast, whether you've got something else you need to manage, you put in here your key milestones of things you have to do. And then very quickly, you'll be able to see, do I have enough time in the week to achieve my week one goal?
Yeah, I like that.
Can I say yes to my friends to go out for dinner? Well, no, I can't. Can I actually go and watch this movie? No, I can't. I don't have time this week.
I'm a hermit right now anyway.
But let's just say for the average
Yeah.
person, right? You need to make sure you're sitting, like, this is very good to see. I'm working from home this day. Okay, no, I'm in the office this day. It's just a very clear page where you can see your milestones. Now, every day, this is what you would fill out. You put your task and you would assign a time to it. And then here you'd fill out your top priorities and your quick wins and then your mood. And this is all around your wellness. So I was tired of having a separate gratitude journal, a separate planner, and a separate reflection journal because I can't carry three things. I just need one. So this has got, what am I grateful for and what are your affirmations? This is Tony Robbins' Power Hour, where he says, write 3 things you're grateful for, which you are, and then put yourself in the present tense. I'm so happy to have 1 million subscribers. I love having a Discord community of X amount.
Yeah.
My podcast is in number 5 and I'm getting called on to the Oprah show, whatever it is.
Right, okay.
But what you're grateful for is the fact that you've grown to 1K. You're grateful for the fact that you have a Discord community so quickly. You're grateful for that you've got Barney to help you with everything like that.
Yeah.
Then you manifest and you do affirmations, which is the exact formula Tony Robbins uses.
Really? Okay.
Then under here you have
And
a
the
habit
affirmations,
tracker.
so here I'm like, I'm grateful I've got 1 million subs, for example.
Correct. It's in the present tense.
Yeah.
You have it.
Cool.
Then here you have a habit tracker. So it's water, sleep, movement, self-care, learning, and whatever you want to do. I put vitamins here, but I've left that as a gap because you need to make sure you're getting enough water, sleep, movement, all of that every single day to be sustainable. There are going to be times in your life, and this is what I talk about in my goal setting workshop in December, is there's 4 areas of your life that you need to set goals in. Okay, your health, your relationships, your career, and your hobbies. So your hobbies are things like learning a new language, I don't know, taking up something, whatever. Your career is obviously your work. Your relationships are like your family, your friends, your girlfriend, your husband, whatever, your wife. And then obviously your health is something you need to prioritize every single month as well. Because if you don't prioritize it, it will catch up with you like it did with me. Okay, so I always tell people, though, there are going to be some months where your health is not a priority to you. You're not going to be going to the gym 5 times a week, like you've just said. There's going to be some months where you are, but you need to keep a consistent amount where you're going. So if that's twice a week and you can manage that, then fine. Even if that's 3 times a week, you walk somewhere, that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to make sure you're putting something in each of these baskets, because there's going to be a time in your life where you're going to really need to focus on your relationships. Because if somebody dies, you're not just going to be like, oh, sorry, don't really care about your grief. I'm just going to get on with my work.
Video, yeah.
You're going to have to put more effort in there. But ideally, you need to be putting some buckets and some goals into those areas to keep it maintained and balanced. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to be on this like thing like Mr. Beast and just like drive it, it's not realistic for everyone, because a lot of us need relationships in our life. A lot of us need the love in our life. A lot of us want to have that in our life. And look, I
want to have it. I think I'm just okay with postponing it.
And that's okay. I think that's okay. I think the mistake you shouldn't make is cutting people out. And last year, I made that very clear to my friends, like, I love you all, I'm really grateful for you, but I just can't come out every Saturday and Sunday. And they understand that. They don't even ask me, and they're not annoyed with me about it, because I communicated that. And they're like, you do your thing. If I say to them, I've got to leave at 9 o'clock, they're like, no problem. You know? And that's not me never making time and effort for them. It's their wedding, it's their engagement, it's their birthday, I'll always go. But I can't stay out till 2 a.m. I'm just too tired, right? And so, like, I'd always make time, but I never like cut them out, if that makes sense, because they're the ones that I want to live my life with, right, at the end of the day. So all around your habits. And then this bit is all around reflection. So today I'm proud of. So what are you proud of every single day? That's really focusing on your strengths. And then what did I do well or enjoy? Again, really focusing on the things that you're good at, right? When you say to someone, what business did you start? They'll say, well, I really loved this, which is why I did it. But if I ask you right now, what are you good at? A lot of people don't know. Right? You can tell me what you're bad at, but you don't tell me your strengths. And then this is what could be better tomorrow, which is where can you outsource, where can you get the help, who do you need? Because you can't do everything by yourself. And so this is essentially what I've created. And in December, I basically run a session where I help anyone achieve any goal that they want. Because it's not just about setting your goal, it's about finding your vision, your purpose, and your why, uncovering those limiting beliefs, rewiring your brain, and actually having actionable steps. So when you leave my workshop, you'll have a 10-page notebook, a workbook that I've curated with all those things that you need to do that before you set any goals.
Yeah.
And you'll leave with this all being filled out. So when you open it in January, you're just ticking.
Shivani, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
This has been amazing. Where can people find you? That's your camera right there.
Okay, yeah. You can find me at Shivani.Pau on Instagram, Shivani Pau on TikTok, and Shivani Pau on YouTube as well.
Nice and clean.
Awesome.
Thank you for an amazing interview. This was so much fun.
Pleasure.
Guys,
Thank
what an
you.
amazing conversation. You can get Shivani's performance planner in the link in the description. And thank you for watching. Please do subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, please do remember to leave a review or a rating. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.